Welcome to Temple Courts Online by the Toronto Church of Christ. And welcome to our marriage discussion. We're so glad you've taken the time to join us on this live stream.
Yeah, we're thankful that you're here tonight, and we're grateful for everyone who is really all across the land and across the greater Toronto area that is here. It's good for everybody to be here as we talk about marriage a little bit. Well, welcome also to the new world that we are living in. Welcome to the new changes that we've all gone through in the last week or two. In some ways, it's really kind of amazing, isn't it? We are celebrating technology. We are able to talk to each other like this, and that, I suppose, is a good thing. But we're also in a highly unnerving time. We're suffering, in some ways, from a great disturbance in our life, and it's concerning and it's unnerving to us all. So you're next.
It is such a unique time in every aspect. Sorry, I got caught off guard there. We're hearing from husbands and wives that you've been stuck at home and are starting to kind of get on each other's nerves, maybe under each other's skin. But we're also hearing from other husbands and wives, conversely, that it's been the busiest time in your life and that work is crazy and there's just no time to even prioritize each other.
Crazy times. So this is our amazing love, and this is Temple Courts Online. For all of you who are on here, and we'll just remind you again, what we're hoping to do is talk a little bit about marriage and then at some point join the chat and have a conversation with any of you who might be interested, or at least be able to field some questions maybe, or get some responses online from some of you on the chat forum. So we're going to get to that in, well, just a few minutes, but first we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about marriage, yours and ours together. So here's the reality. Everyone is facing stressors in their life right now. We know that. So you're probably asking yourself, or maybe you didn't. I know I asked myself. So if with all of these stressors and what this world is going through right now, why in the world would Temple Courts Online decide to have a marriage class on this very first night out? And
good question.
That might be a good question. Here it is, simply put. With everything that's going on in the world right now, everything that's going on in your life right now, I think it would be naive to assume that your marriage, which is precious to you, and if you have children, it's precious to your children. It certainly is precious to God, and we're all faith-filled people on this call, if not all of us, most of us. We'd be naive to think that what's happening out there, what's happening to us, what's happening at our work, what's happening in all over the world, we'd be naive to think that that's not going to impact our marriage. And so we want to begin, and we thought it might be a good time to begin talking about our marriage. Since we're going to go through whatever this is for however long it's going to last, what we want is our marriages to do as good as they can do through this. So we want to begin with a really great proverb. We want to begin with this text and share it with you because we think it talks about amazing love. So this is it. It's from Proverbs chapter 30, in verse 18. It simply says this: there are 3 things that amaze me. No, 4 things that I don't understand. How an eagle glides through the sky. How a snake slithers on a rock. How a ship navigates the ocean. And how a man loves a woman. There are 4 things that are amazing. 4 things that this guy just can't figure out. He talks about ships, and he talks about eagles, and he talks about snakes. Oh, those are amazing. They're mysterious. They are hard to understand. But the 4th thing, and that's what this proverb is really all about, the most amazing of all, the most mysterious of all, is that 2 people really love each other.
You know, Hollywood and Netflix has got this very figured out and are cornering the market on all kinds of stories and movies about romantic love. But really that is all about desire. And we know that at the end of those movies, there's life afterwards that has to be lived. and keeping what we have with each other and what we formed at those beginning stages of that infatuation and desire, keeping that alive and mysterious and amazing for the rest of our lives is a lot of work. And so that's what we're wanting to talk about with all of you, just how to keep that love amazing.
So it sounds to me, like keeping your love amazing takes a lot of hard work. And so I can hear the collective amens out there, and I can hear the collective groans. Of course it does. Tell us something we don't know. But let me just do a juxtaposition, if you will. Since you are putting a lot of hard work right now into everything else in your life, you're working really hard to be physically distancing yourself from others. You're working really hard to disinfect everything that you touch, certainly in the public forum. You're working really hard to be highly aware and highly intentional in every other area of your life. Can we just say this at the beginning, at the outset? So too, we'd like to challenge you at least, so you too should be putting and highly focused meeting the needs of your marriage. It is just, we think it's just as important as you having hand sanitizer and the obsessiveness that that's become in our life. So our encouragement is that we'll get just as obsessive with our love for each other and amazing love for each other.
Yes, and you mentioned public, Kevin, but we're not going out in public as much as possible, right? So I just wanted to cover that.
Right.
And it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning to stay home. So we just really want to assume that you are also willing to go to some hard places in your marriage to really work at it and make it great and protect it during these really crazy times, unprecedented times that we're in. We want to really work hard at our marriage. So we're going to talk about that over the next few weeks. And one of the things that was hard for me, even at the beginning of our marriage, was even just this idea that marriage should be all in, 110%. What I understood from the collective wisdom of the world was that no, marriage is 50-50. Why should I work even 51% harder, that 1% harder than he's working? And I really had that mindset that everything should be fair. But the things that we're going to talk about tonight really are hard because it's about you putting in 100%, and that has nothing to do with how much your spouse puts into the marriage, but really us working on ourselves.
Yeah, so I don't know how you feel about that idea. Like, again, a lot of you are like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but I wonder if that actually plays out in our life. I know even in our marriage, there's times where I find myself measuring how much I'm putting in or putting out. There's times where I begin to feel sorry for myself. Well, I've worked really hard, or I've gone this far. I'd like you to meet me here. And that makes sense in our minds and in our souls, but it doesn't help having an amazing love.
No.
So here's a scripture that might tie in better, or that ties in, I think, to what Lisa just talked about. And that is from 2 Corinthians in chapter 5 and verse 14. For Christ's love compels us, because we're convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them, was raised again. A real key line, of course, in here is that line about that those who live should no longer live for themselves. And that's the great difficulty of being a human, isn't it? That's the great human condition. How to be sacrificial, how to not live for yourself, how to not measure, I've given so many percentage points and you need to match my giving as well. And where does that really come out? Where does that really raise its ugly head? It can be in marriage. So for us to read this passage, we understand, you could be saying to yourself, it's not really a marriage passage, Kevin and Lisa, and well, you might have us there, but we'd counter back and say, in everything, we think it really is. Because the understanding, if you're a person of faith and you're involved in a marriage, one to another, look, one has died for us, and therefore we are willing to sacrifice. We are willing to have the courage to put ourselves less, if you will, that I no longer live. And I just want to expand on this point, not too long, but I do want to say this. For those of us who are people of faith, those of us who belong to the church and we're disciples and followers of Jesus Christ, we have learned, or we could possibly, let me not accuse everybody, but we possibly could have learned the art of really living out Christianity out there. But when we come home and the door closes and we're with the other person who has the matching ring, we don't push ourselves as much, right? And we come back with a perfectly logical argument. Hey, babe, if I can't be real here, where can I be real? And I feel for you. And the reason I feel for you is because I feel the exact same way. But is that what this passage really says? And he died for those that are married, that when they get home, they don't have to live for themselves. No, not really. But he died for those. That those who live should no longer live for themselves.
Awesome. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about ways that you can be making your marriage grow and be protected. Yeah, that was your part that I'm taking right now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you're doing a great job, so you should just go.
So anyway.
Let me just look at you.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, we are going to be referencing some things that we've learned from the Gottman Institute that talks about four areas that could really impact your marriage negatively. And so we want to really talk about those, and don't worry, we're not going to talk about all four of them tonight. And to be culturally relevant, we're going to talk about these four negative things that could, possibly turn your marriage in a negative way. We're going to talk about them like they're viruses, because that's kind of relevant to what's going on today. And so we're going to talk about four viruses over the next 4 weeks that could infect your marriage and really be fatal to your marriage. And so we really want to talk about those, and tonight we're going to talk about the first one, right?
Yeah, the four viruses that, I hope it's not too soon for us to use that phrase, but since everybody's thinking about it, we just thought that might be clever. We'll check the comments to see if it was clever or not. But the four viruses that we're saying can infect your marriage are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So tonight, we want to talk about the first one, which is a big one, and that is quite simply criticism. Criticism. Criticism, we don't want to insult you. We know you know what criticism is, but let's flesh it out for the sake of this conversation. And let's do some personal reflecting, even while we hear this. Criticism says this. It says that you are the problem. It says, or it more than says, when we participate in criticizing, even if we know we're doing it or not, that's really not the issue. But when we criticize, what we're doing is we're saying that the person is the problem versus us being specific about what the problem really is. This really happens in marriages, and you know it, because we know each other so well. And we've talked about this problem before. And then we talked about it again. And then we talked about it again. How many times have we talked about this? Now, I sound a lot more like my wife right now, because she could say, I talked to you about this. And so we know what it is to live together and repeatedly talk about these things. So eventually we stop talking about the problem and we start talking about the person. Eventually the person becomes the problem. And criticism says, whether we mean it or not, criticism says, what's wrong with you?
Okay, so we're going to just take the next few minutes to kind of, give this a body so you really understand what we're talking about, because it's very profound. And in our marriage, we have really found this to be so helpful, this understanding that let's look at the problem almost like an entity and not the person. And sometimes the problem is that it's our spouse's action that is the problem. So how can we not look at our spouse when they're causing the problem? But it's very profound and deep if you can really understand that. Dissect the problem, even if it's an action that your spouse is doing, and don't drill down on that. Don't drill down on the person or make these big criticizing statements. And usually they start with you are this or you are that. And so we're going to kind of go into that a little bit right now so that you understand what we're talking about. And hopefully, we're hoping that this is going to be a real breakthrough for us as we talk about just really understanding what the virus criticism looks like, avoiding it, and change your thinking in it.
Yeah, so let's try to think of some of the yous. Of course, we're drawing from our own life, but we've hung around enough of you. We can even draw from some of your lives. Am I allowed to say that? So let's think about some yous that we say. Sometimes we see a problem of lateness and we say, you're always late.
Yeah, or a big one is you never listen. You don't hear me, or even worse, we can get really ugly. You're deaf, what is wrong with you? As opposed to, and okay, let's give some more before we get to the solutions.
You want to fix it
already? I
already?
can't handle it.
Well,
What are some other ones?
Well, sometimes we say, you're too controlling.
That's true. Or I've heard myself say things like, you're so cynical.
Yeah, well, yeah. You never change.
You're too negative.
There seems to be a theme here. You're never satisfied.
You're always, we already said you're always late. And that's me anyway. I'm the one who's always late. So
It's true.
Just you get the point. They're just, instead of talking about the problem, that moment when they're late, you're always late. Like jumping to the whole criticizing the person as opposed to what they've done. And we know if we're going to be married for the long haul, we're going to see the same things over and over and over again, and we've got to give each other a fresh start and not just, encapsulize the whole problem in you. Really drilling on the character, because that just does not help. And actually, I think, makes our spouses or ourselves just even more sort of in a corner, and there's no way out.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So maybe what you could do for the next few minutes, we'll keep talking, but now might be a good time to start thinking, so what predominantly do you say that always includes the you when you say it to your spouse? And I know the temptation right now is to think, well, I don't, but you do. I just did it. You do. I know you do. We all do it. And it comes out of a place, a lot of times, like Lisa said, it comes out of a place of frustration or something like that, but it's no less damaging. No matter what justifications you might feel inside, and whenever you have a marriage conversation, certainly whenever we have marriage conversations, it always floats to the surface, this comment especially. You don't understand how bad I've got it. You don't understand. The guy I'm married to, he looked like a real follower of God when we were dating. Then we got married, and I don't think he's even a Christian. Those kind of things. You don't understand the woman I'm married to. And then we have the tendency or the temptation to go so far as to say, as we look at everybody else, it must be nice for you. It must be nice you have an easy marriage. It must be nice you're married to a caring man. It must be nice your wife listens to you. It must be nice. And away we go. And see, and that all comes from the place of us being critical of our spouse and blaming and using that you analogy. And I will just take a second to say to everyone, as I've said before in other marriage events that I've talked at, if you ever find yourself saying, it must be nice, or you're so lucky, you are in a terrible place at that moment. And what I would say back to that is that you are completely dismissing the work and the energy and the difficulty and the elbow grease that other people put into their marriage. If you see someone who looks like they've got just a beautifully sweet marriage, it's because of work. Have no illusions. It's because of effort. It's because they've dealt with and are dealing with being critical towards one another. So don't ever find yourself saying it must be nice or I wish I was you, because you're just giving yourself an out and you're insulting the person that you're saying that to. So as we talk about these yous, and we've compared these yous that we say to a virus, the antidote to this virus that will kill our marriage is quite simply change you to I. And that's really our so what of the night here. Change the way you think. And before you speak, so change the way you think and keep telling yourself, before I say this, I need to take the you out of it and put I into it. Change the you to I.
Okay, so that can kind of sound confusing, and so we're just thinking that if you think back to the list that we said of you're this, you don't listen, you're whatever. So changing the you to I is actually still dealing with the problem, but we have to figure out what the problem is. It's not the person, even though they might be, you think they're the problem, but what they're doing is the problem. So to change the you to I, for example, if you're saying, you never listen to me, you do all the talking. Rather than saying that, I could say, if this were the case between Kevin and I could say, instead of saying, you never listen, you don't let me talk or anything like that, I could say, I feel a little shut down here. I feel like I don't get any airspace when we're having a conversation. I feel like I need to vent and get some things out that are on my heart, and I just need a little more of your listening ear. That's a whole different ball game than you never listen and you never let me speak, and really puts the other person in a position where they can actually give you what you need. So all on that list of the things that you never do this, you never do that, really trying to figure out what is it that you need? What is it that is happening that is causing you the frustration, and really identify. It's a discipline. It really is a discipline to just, figure out, I know I just want to attack this person that I'm living with, that I'm married to, and their character, and tell them what I think about, what they need to change, but that's not what we're suggesting. We're suggesting you talk about the problem, which ultimately means that we're all going to have to change our characters a little bit, probably, but it's not assuming the person has a poor character. It's assuming that they don't understand what you need and what they're doing is causing this discomfort for you. That's
a really good point. This word you, when I use it towards Lisa, when you use it towards your spouse, it's really caustic. It's very poisonous. It's toxic. And some of you think we might be overcooking this right now, but we're really not.
Not according to Dr. Gottman.
Well, and not according, to the Lord.
Yes.
Who's more of a doctor than our friend Gottman. But it's a real caustic, as I said, type of word to use. And it comes out in all kinds of ways. For example, if I say, I'll even change it up a bit. If I say, where were you? Do you hear the inflection in my voice? Where were you? Whose problem is it? It's very much her problem, right? Where were you? When in fact I could, or maybe I should really be saying, what's really going on in your heart when you say, where were you? Maybe you should change, not maybe, certainly you should change and learn how to say, or I need to learn how to say, I am worried when I don't know where you are. I'm frightened when I don't know where you are. I was scared. I was upset because we're going to be late. Where were you? Any number of those things replace the where were you accusational sort of tone. Lisa and I were talking about this today, even as we were getting ready to do this, and I said to her, what's really interesting about the human condition is that we have no problem 23 hours a day of taking care of, we have no problem with I, 23 hours a day. I'm looking out for me. I know how I feel. I'm this, I'm that, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, I'm whatever, I'm gassy. It's all about me. No problem. You don't even have to teach me how to look out for I. And then 1 hour a day, it's about, when someone frustrates us, it's about you. What God is saying when He teaches us to be followers of His, He says, stop thinking about I so much and think about the yous out there. And that's the greatest, well, the second greatest command, isn't it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And what, number 2? Love your neighbor as yourself. Stop thinking about you, start thinking about them. But whenever we get into a fight, I see this switch happening. When we get into this disagreement, whenever I get critical, it switches right around and I no longer care about me verbally. It becomes all about you. So my whole life is about me until I get critical, and then it's about you. And it's just not fair at all. It's not right. It's not healthy. So we've got to learn to change the you to I in our phraseology.
And we don't want to ignore the fact that there's things in our spouses that are just not going to change. Let's be honest. And, we've been married almost 30 years, and there's things that, in some ways you are getting worse, and that's, and
what year did you realize things weren't going to change?
Anyway,
Oh.
so I just wanted to share a really cool story. Last year, about this time, we went to an all-day seminar on love with Gary Chapman, who wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages. And it was such a great day. I think he's in his 80s, and he's just full of wisdom, been married a long time. And it was so encouraging. One thing near the end of the day, he talked about this. When you realize your spouse is not going to change something that has been driving you crazy forever, and you're just thinking, if we read the right book, or we take the right class, or get the right counseling, but some things are just, we have to accept. And he shared this story about his wife, who is very loud in the kitchen and bangs the cupboard doors whenever she's shutting them. And right away, I was like, oh my goodness, that's me. I was laughing. So much so that Kevin went and changed all our cupboard doors, put those little gadgets in that make the door not slam at the very end. But it doesn't matter, I'm still loud in the kitchen, I bang dishes, I clang, and it really drives him crazy. But Dr. Chapman was just sharing how, at this stage of his life, he's in his 80s, he's just kind of like, when he hears the banging, he just thinks, my wife, she's so cute. And I love that. And, that really was helpful. Even that story was helpful in our marriage, just to realize there's some things you just got to embrace and say, my husband, my wife, they're so cute. And actually, Kevin came down sometime after that seminar, and I'd been doing my usual loud banging in the kitchen, and he walked in and just kind of smiled at me and just said, hey, honey, what you building? Which I thought we had a good laugh, because it wasn't a critical, cynical, sarcastic, what are you building? It was just a cute thing, and I just felt loved in that moment, and that's so cool. Actually, last night, there was a big crash, and he came down, I looked at him and said, I broke a bowl, and he was totally fine with it. And so I think we've come to a place of peace about me being loud in the kitchen. So I don't know what it is for you, but for all of us, there's those things that we just have to accept about our spouse, and even kind of change our mindset about it and just embrace it and go, I love that's special about my spouse, and I'm the one who gets to live with them and see their warts and the things that are whatever. So we just wanted to share that with you, and as kind of a caveat to all the things that we still want to grow and change in, but some things we do need to come to a place of peace and just even change our mindset about how it's not going to change.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about hearing something might not change someday in your spouse. And right now you're thinking, well, God says everything can happen. Amen, you're right. And there's a good chance that some things in your spouse aren't going to change. And I hope you can get to peace with that. And if you can't, then the virus of criticism is going to be perpetually in your marriage and eventually create a real sickness that you do not want in your marriage. Using this analogy that criticism is a virus, I think is a pretty accurate one. Growing up in my life, I especially as a young man, I lived in a home, and I think my family members would agree with this if they're on this live streaming, or if they ever saw this someday. I lived in a home where criticism was very much a part of living, and it really does a number on, and not just the spouses, it does a number on kids. When I say does a number, that's just the nicest way I can say it is not healthy. And it creates a foundational problem in a person that is very difficult to remove. It creates a foundational problem that lingers for a long time. And you might tonight be saying, Kevin, Lisa, you're onto it. We have criticism towards one another in our marriage. What do we need to do? Give us some real big money tips on how to figure this out, how to fix it. With all due respect, we just did. With all due respect, we just gave you the diamonds and the gold on how to fix criticism that may have gone now for years in your marriage. Criticism that may live in your home, and if you have children, may be impacting them. Criticism that you perhaps even take to your workplace. And it is change you to I. It takes such hard work to think of this before you open your mouth. It takes such hard work to think, what does God want me to do here? And I know that's cliche, but sometimes cliche got cliche because it's the right answer.
It's true.
You just need to do it.
Yeah.
And so we're not here tonight to suggest to you that criticism is an unfortunate byproduct of any marriage. We're here to tell you that criticism is viral to the point that it can be fatal to your marriage. And may I say this, especially today, especially with the stressors that we are all under now. I don't know if your marriage is the same, well, I shouldn't even say it. Your marriage is the same as ours. Right now, we have no clue what's going on. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know what announcement is going to be made. We don't know what our life is going to look like. You say, well, you should just have more faith and not be stressed. Thanks for sharing that. There are stressors in our life right now. And if you start and keep on criticism in your marriage right now, I guarantee you, you may not catch this virus that is out there, but you have caught a virus.
Yeah.
And it will be fatal
Yeah.
to your marriage. So the antidote to the viral infection, we don't know the one out there, but we know the one in here in our criticism towards one another and the criticism that you have towards your spouse. The antidote is change you to I. Change the way you speak to each other. Change the way you think before you open that beautiful mouth of yours and talk with that wonderful tongue of yours. Change the way you think.
Something. Really remember, criticize the problem, not the person.
So let's interact together a little bit. I'm going to reach for the chat, and we're going to see if this works. If it doesn't work, well, we tried.
Then it was a short class.
And if it does work, there we go. So I'm just going to look at the chat a little bit here. And if you have any questions for us, and we'll try to give you an answer. If we can't give you an answer, we'll try to fake it. And if we can't give you an answer and fake it, we'll just say, that's
we'll
a really good
If we can't answer the question,
we'll pray for you. I like that.
Yes, we will.
Let's keep that one in the chamber. So if you have any questions, if this is working at all, we'll see if see if something comes up. And I guess this would be the point where we just keep talking until a question comes up, if a question comes up.
So to be specific, this is Q&A now, and so if you have any questions, write them in the comments, and we can answer them. And we won't mention your name.
Right. This is a safe place, judgment-free zone. Here's a good question what do you think about this? And I know the answer to it. Is criticism only when it's not true? Is a criticism is it only criticism if it's not true? Do you understand the question?
This is where Kevin and I have our marriage problems, because I always have to say, I don't know what you're saying.
I don't. Well, I'll just ask it. And I won't say what gender.
Sorry.
Is it only
this is the
criticism?
question someone asked?
Yeah,
I
we're
thought
live.
you just made it up.
Oh no, we're live. Hey, everybody. You want to see some criticism happen while we speak? Okay,
Well,
listen
now
to
I
this.
feel
babe.
bad.
Listen to this.
Okay.
Here's the question. Is it only criticism if it's not true?
I just don't understand the question.
I'll answer it
Okay.
then. Absolutely not. Criticism, so there's two ways I would answer that. Is it toxic criticism? Toxic criticism is where you're saying you. I think what may be trying to be unpacked here is the goal in us using I and talking to one another, you talking to your spouse with I, is not to remove or is not to not address the problem. You've got to address the problem. You've got to be able to say, look, this is an issue with me. This really bothers me. I, feel this. I am not feeling heard, and we need to talk about this until I feel heard. I am feeling controlled, and I would like to talk to you about this until I no longer feel these things. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I think I get it now. So, like, for example, Kevin is a very sarcastic person, and he shares that from the pulpit, he speaks all the time about even how he has to work, in his parenting and in his marriage on not being a sarcastic person. And yet, when we are talking to each other, it's critical for me to say, you're so sarcastic. But is it true? It's true because you even admit it, right? Can you validate?
Sorry, yes, I'm not multitasking.
So when I'm saying, it still hurts him if I say, you're so sarcastic. Right? Like,
yes.
You would rather me say, when you said that kind of snidely, this is how I feel and I can't handle that right now. I need a little more, empathy from you.
Yes.
But it doesn't help him for me to say, you are so, sarcastic.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Because you is accusation.
Yeah, it's true
Yeah.
that he is so sarcastic, but it's not helpful to our marriage for me to be, criticizing him for even if it's true. Is that answer the question?
It answers it in part, and I think also something that we've just got to face is that one spouse may have something to say. And so if Lisa says something to me, or if I say something to Lisa, first of all, I need to stop weaponizing the word you, because you is accusational, so Lisa just did a great job right there. Don't do that. But just because I bring something up does not mean that Lisa can dismiss it because it's not true. She just doesn't get to say, that's not true, we don't have to talk about that. No. And I think that's what this question is really all about. Of course we need to talk about it, even if I'm out in left field, even if Lisa is totally wrong. As long as she's not accusational, but if she's coming at me with a heart of not living for herself, let's talk about this, I love you, I care for you. And even if it's wrong, and this is where we can weaponize defensiveness back, and that's in another week, we're going to talk about that type of defensiveness as well. So I think I'll just ask another question.
Yes.
That is being said. How long, Lisa, you can answer this. How long did it take for you to accept each other as you are, not wanting to change these specific characteristics that belong to your spouse?
Wow, that's a great question. And the other one was a great question too. I just didn't understand it, so don't offend anybody. But I think that that's a great question. I feel like it came in stages, and I feel like different times of stress, also catapulted us into, we could have gone one way or another. Are we going to let this horrible thing or whatever is going on in our lives bring us together or tear us apart? And oftentimes trials really have been the most helpful thing to build our marriage, wouldn't you say? And just realizing that, do I want to go through this alone, or do I want to go through this, with someone by my side, having my back? And I feel like definitely it's come in stages,
Yep.
and not probably certainly in the first 5 years of marriage, but the honeymoon was over after about 3 years. I think year 3 was really difficult, and then just stages, different, 10 years.
Yep.
It was a great milestone, and I feel like in the last couple of years have been some really challenging times that have nearly,
Yeah.
I
think that all that's true. I don't know if we can put a chronological date on it. What Lisa's saying is true. It comes in stages. But here, if I can just say what undergirds figuring this out, is the word grace.
Yes.
If you're not willing to offer each other grace, well, you're in a whole other world of trouble. So, grace, and you sort of give that to each other, and you find your way. And some of us got married pretty young, and our proclivities and strangenesses came out over certain amounts of time too, and you just start to go, wow, I didn't realize that person was like
True.
that.
And I feel like in the weeks to come, we're going to have some great practicals
Yep.
for that question.
So here's another
on
question
that.
as well. With sharing the truth in love, sometimes when you share the truth in love, that borders on criticism, or that feels like criticism even though you're sharing the truth in love. What would be some clear markers to differentiate between, are you being critical or are you doing it in love? Some markers there.
Gosh, I think for me, I can feel like when I'm hurt and I'm trying to express my hurt to Kevin, I can feel the difference between me wanting to make him understand or also me wanting to hurt him back a little bit. So I don't know,
This is huge.
I think he says my eyes get really big, like kind of start to dilute, or not dilute, but dilate, and I get crazy eyes apparently when I'm just like, yeah, I'm ready to verbally punch back. And so I have to, that's when I have to deal with that anger inside of myself. And so I can't trust anything that's going to come out of my mouth at those moments. And have to just, again, everything we talked about tonight is really slowing everything down.
Yes.
Slowing,
Yes,
because
yes,
you can't
yes, yes.
think, it really almost like, walking in slow motion to dial it back and make sure you don't say the wrong thing. So I think our conversations have gotten a lot slower over the years as we try to, like, literally, not say the wrong thing, which maybe sounds really fake, but it's much better to hold it in than say the wrong thing.
That's true, because you can't get that back. That's a very good
So
point.
for me, speaking the truth in love, it's a visceral feeling. I know when I'm not feeling loving. I know when I'm in danger of hurting instead of speaking in love.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, everyone. This is probably not gone as well as I was hoping it to go. But here's a question that I've talked about this already. But how is a good way or a better way to communicate when you don't feel heard? Like, instead of saying you don't listen to me, what's a better way to say that?
Okay, that's a great question. I feel that.
You ever felt that
yeah,
way from me?
Definitely,
you ever felt not
I
heard?
have felt. Yep. And
Yep.
I think that that's when it just takes a lot of patience to keep calm and go at it again. And I think the longer we're married, the harder that is, because sometimes it's hard to be married for such a length of time and still feel like, really? You're still not listening, or you're still not getting me, and being misunderstood is a painful thing. We all want to be understood. And so I feel like it takes a lot of discipline to just not getting tired of having to redirect it to try and help the spouse that you feel is not listening to understand. What do you think?
Yeah, I think all of this. I think the answers to most of these frustrate us, honestly. I think the hardest thing to do in a relationship with another human being is really keep love as your highest priority, and caring as your highest priority. And especially with marriage. I mean, marriage is, if nothing, it's by its definition is complete. Well, we know from the Bible that it's complete unity, it's complete togetherness, but it's more than that. It's complete comfort. It's complete no secrets. You've seen this person. If you've been married for any length of time, you get to see them at their worst, and that's actually the point of it. Isn't it great to find one person in this journey that you can just see and be at your absolute worst? You get to see them when they've just thrown up, just awful. You get to see them with their hair and, So, but over time, it's ironic, the very thing that we want and we long for in life, we start to resent it. And we get critical of it, and then the criticisms come out. So this highest place of really being loving, and when I say the reason we don't necessarily love all these answers is because they're so hard. The answer really is, as Lisa said, slow it down a whole lot, and actually care more about the person that you're speaking to than what's inside of you that you need to hear, and all this has got to get, and I get it, we all do it, right? Your heart starts to pound, your guts start to churn, your mind starts to race, your face gets flushed, it changes color, and your eyes dilate and maybe even change color. They were brown and now they're green. I get it. All that's a real thing, and everybody has a problem with it. What's the answer? Is there a pill? Is there an antidote to fix it? Not really. What is the I? Well, it's Philippians as well. Consider one another better than yourself. Now the problem is, as I even say that, some of you are worried that your spouse just heard that, because the way your spouse plays the game is they say, you're supposed to treat me, but we do that. And if you do that, if you're on this call and you do that, I don't know if there's a nice word for it.
That's a great.
You're a foolish person if you do that.
That is a great scripture, Philippians 2, and one that has been hopefully the foundation. We've talked about it a lot from the beginning of our marriage, and a great exercise, as you're changing your thinking, when you really do feel like your spouse is so wrong and you're so right, because I think that's where we really get caught up with, who's right and who's wrong. But the right thing to do is just to let it go, or not say the hurtful thing you want to say. That scripture helps me just to look at Kevin and in my head say, you're better than me. Like when I'm feeling so right and he's so wrong, just to look at him and go, you're better than me. Because that's what the scripture says, consider others better than yourself. And I think when we're right, we're feeling better than the other person. So, so many great mind changes can come from the scriptures, like Philippians 2 and the scriptures that we looked at tonight. But yeah.
But just remember this as we begin to wrap it up. Usually the biggest problems that we have, I think it's unique that we're trying to do this virus analogy, because a virus is absolutely horrifying to us. Look at where we're living right now. It's horrifying. And it's absolutely invisible to us. It's minute, microscopic in fact. It's this little wee thing that if it weren't so dangerous to us, we would never give it a second thought. And I think about the viral problem of criticism in our marriage. It's microscopic, really. And that's the way some of us feel. It's not a big deal. Honey, I just said it that way. I didn't mean it that way. You're being overreacting. And just channel some of the things that you found yourself saying to each other. And it's deadly. And you should know this as we conclude. The things that damage and possibly ruin a marriage are quite often, not always, but quite often, the little dumb things. The little things. Listen, we've got relatives just like you do, friends and relatives who've been married a long time, and as long as they've been married, their marriage has been dead at least half that time, and they're just existing together. What happened? If you talk to them, you'll find out it's usually the little microscopic, unimportant things that just have caused them to be critical, express the criticalness in an improper way. Now you've done that, you can't take it back and you can't fix it, and so the virus is in,
just goes on
and
on
the cells
on.
start dying. So, don't do that. That was a pretty negative way to end things, isn't it? So, what's the answer?
It's all right.
Change you to I.
Yeah.
We've gone over 45 minutes here, and we're grateful that you've listened to
Yes,
us.
thank you so much.
There's
for
more
joining
work
us.
to be done
Yeah.
that you will do. And this
Yeah.
is Temple Courts Online. We've got lots of other things happening this week. Want you to tune in. Go to torontocc.com and check those things out and make plans to be a part of those, whether they're on a Zoom call or streaming like this. Thanks for your questions.
Yes.
And thanks for listening
Thank
to us.
you.
Next Monday night, Monday Marriage,
Yes.
Marriage.
Yes.
We'll be back
Please come back.
on this YouTube channel, and we're going to try to live our life in such a way that we can bring something back to you that you might be able to learn about marriage too. So everybody stay well. Make sure you're safe this week.
Yes, please.
Really take care of your marriage. In all this craziness, it's one of the most important things as well. Good night.
Good night.